The memory processing sheet will help you clear the emotional charge around your memories. Once you begin, if you get too upset at any time during processing, step away from it and go to the emergency kit, where you'll do the just tapping and grounding before either continuing the work or stopping. If you need to step away from it, use the session closing technique, which is included in the emergency kit. To process memories, it's best to do it in small, manageable parts. You take a longer memory and break it down into sections. It's like breaking down any issue into parts and pieces, but in the case of a past event, those parts will be snippets of time. In order to effectively use this technique, the memory or event being addressed should ideally be broken down into segments that are about 3 minutes or less. Instructions for how to use the memory processing sheet. 1. Choose the specific memory you would like to process and give it a brief title. Pick a memory that's about 3 minutes or less. If you have a much longer memory you wish to work on, break it down into segments and clear one part at a time. Think of it as a short movie. If it were a movie, what title would you give it? Jot that down and use that wording as you tap through the scene. For example, my gym teacher pulled me aside in kindergarten and told me that I couldn't skip properly and not to continue. The full memory included mocking statements from classmates and later embarrassment in front of my parents. In this case, these are 3 separate scenes to process. 1. The teacher pulling me aside and telling me there was a problem. 2. Hearing the mocking statements from classmates. And 3. Embarrassment in front of my parents. So to process a memory, choose only one portion to work with at a time. The 3-minute movie for that first scene might be titled, Can't Skip. 2. Rate the intensity of this memory. Now give a rating to that memory by saying the title out loud, but don't go into the memory. It's not about recalling the memory at all. Just consider the title and guess what you think the intensity might be if you were to bring it all up and go into it. Give it a rating on a scale of 0 to 10, where 0 is you don't feel anything as you think of the title, and 10 is that you get quite emotional just starting to think about it. Write your number in the box provided on the worksheet, and in this example, I might call it Can't Skip, and the rating of intensity is an 8. 3. General tapping on the title if the intensity is higher than a 2. The idea of this step is not to get into the content of the memory, but to address the feelings about even thinking about bringing it up. Doing this kind of tapping is intended to keep you a bit distanced from the actual scene and to take the edge off of any intensity that might come up. Once you've given your scene a title, imagine that it is away from you. As you imagine viewing it from the outside, without opening up the contents and watching the whole thing, notice if you feel any emotional intensity about tapping on the scene. Perhaps there is some hesitation or a stressful feeling about going there and going into it. That is what you are tapping on in this step, not the actual parts of the scene, just the idea of the entire scene. To do this, use the even though statement along with the title that you wrote in number 1, and your reminder phrases will be this memory or this movie, or you could just repeat the title of the memory or movie as you tap through the points. This will help to keep you a bit distanced from the actual scene. Keep tapping on the title alone until your general intensity reduces enough that you feel safe and comfortable to actually go into the scene. This may take only a couple of rounds of tapping, or it may take more. That's okay too. Once the intensity has dropped to a point where you feel comfortable enough to continue, then you can move on to the next step. 4. Narrate the scene, starting at a neutral beginning and stopping as soon as there is any intensity. This is when you do let yourself get fully into the memory and allow yourself to drop right into it. Choose a point in the story before you felt emotional about it. Start telling the story aloud and stop as soon as you notice any intensity. Even if it's only a 1 or 2 intensity, pause and then go to the next step. 5. Process any portion of the memory that has intensity until it gets down to 2 or less using the DIY tapping worksheet. The part of the story that brought up intensity becomes step 1 on the DIY tapping worksheet. It's a tappable issue. For step 2 on the DIY tapping worksheet, see if you notice the specifics about what bothers you. Tune into your senses. Notice anything you recall that you may have seen, heard, felt, smelled, or even tasted that brought up emotion, and use the system to tap on those specific parts and pieces until the intensity moves down to a 2 or below for that piece of the memory. It's okay if you don't have much information in step 2 of the worksheet. It may be a simple memory without a lot of pieces to break down. 6. Repeat steps 4 and 5 until the entire 3-minute or less movie or memory has a 2 or less intensity. After you clear one piece of the memory, go back to step 4 and start telling the story from the neutral beginning point again. Keep going until you hit another point of intensity and repeat this process, this cyclical process, until the entire scene can be recalled and told without any emotional intensity. 7. Narrate aloud the entire scene one last time to ensure that there's no remaining intensity. If there is any left, go back and repeat steps 4 and 5. As you do this, try to enhance and make the scene even brighter and more intense in your mind than you may have before in order to really test it. If there is still some intensity, go back and continue clearing. Once you're able to tell the story without any emotional intensity, you know that it has cleared. 8. Note any insights, learnings, or new perspectives you had with respect to this memory. This is a very useful optional step. While you went through the process, you may have noticed some shifts in your perspective about the memory and/or the people or events involved. Be sure to write these insights down in your DIY tapping journal. Often, you'll notice that you feel differently about the people involved. A sense of understanding or compassion for others or yourself is not uncommon. Some people actually see the scene from a different angle in their mind. Others have a sense that the memory is just farther away. You may have a sense of peace about it, or you may notice that there's some kind of action step that you now need to take with respect to it. All of this is great information, and writing it down is very helpful.